Alright guys, I've got another one I want to share with y'all. It's going to be a little lengthier than the ones I normally do. Some of y'all have asked for some longer videos, so we're going to go for a longer video. I found this one, and I really like this this story. And I think y'all are going to really enjoy it too. I don't know, it just kind of a warm, kind of a, I don't know, just feels real. And we'll get into that. I appreciate all you guys that's been helping me on the PayPal. We haven't done a whole lot of investigating right now. I'm having to have some transmission work done on my vehicle, so that's kind of halted us back a little bit. And you know, transmission work's not cheap, so I'm having that done. And as soon as I get that done, we plan on getting out and stuff like that. But it's coming. We're going to do some on-the-scene stuff coming up. But again, the PayPal stuff has helped so much. A lot of y'all have stepped up, and it's much appreciated. And God bless each and every one of you that are doing that. I really appreciate it for those of you who can. Those of you who can't, a comment and a like has always been enough since the day I started. I appreciate it. He says, I wrote these words in the summer of 2012 after falling in love with one of, and I believe it's pronounced Clayoquot Sounds Remote's Corners. It's a pristine region on Vancouver Island, west coast. The inlet radiates the mystical air of the Pacific Northwest more than any other place I've visited. A dramatic topography covered in the exquisite expression of the ancient temperate rainforest ecosystem. The river valley and the adjacent fjord are powerfully humbling. The wild charm of the place cast a spell over me. After venturing out there on a kayak trips and camping in the valley for 1 or 2 nights, I knew I would return someday to spend much longer. In early 2014, everything seemed to fall in place. I prepared for a stay of 1 of the 2 months, a solitary hidden cabin, clinging to the vastness of the wild scenery and representing the only human trace in this realm, would act as a perfect home base. My intention was to explore the nature of wilderness living, tune in with this region's pristine air, observe wildlife, and sharpen my senses into interplay with the natural world. I wanted to deeply connect to the feeling of being in this place and situation rather than exploring it itself. The cabin nestled secretly between the waterline and steep forest mountain slopes behind. I unloaded my kayak and boxes full of gear, waved at the driver, and watched his boat disappear into the distance. This had been my dream for 2 years. I moved into the cabin, settled in, and started the simple, rustic, yet very comfortable and gentle way of wilderness living I had imagined. The cabin was an ideal home base and a safe shelter. The days were sunny without a single cloud in the sky, the night starlight and cool. I observed the morning fog lifting off the mountains into the fjord when I awoke. Saw the tides roll in and out of the front of the cabin, watched the light revealing the many different facets, shades, and moods of my favorite place. Here, however, bald eagles, kingfishers, gulls, ducks, seals, sea lions, and river otters revealed themselves quite frequently. The haunting call of a loon traveled across the water from the estuary to the evening, and often I could hear the deep booming of male sooty grouse resounding from deep inside the mountain valleys. I paddled to the river each day and evening, quietly sitting in my kayak, observing and listening. After dark, I ate dinner by candlelight inside the cabin, and then switched on my headlamp to write wildlife reports and journal notes. Later, I lit incense candles and sticks to keep the mosquitoes away, and fell asleep comforted by the solitude of this remote place, so used to echoing back at itself without the attendance of human witnesses. My mind was free of distractions and seemed to stretch for beautiful days of living at the moment felt like weeks. I came to realize that part of the beauty of my favorite place and its appeal to me was unapproachable seclusion. As much as it was a place of bright beauty, abundance, peace, retreat, and serenity, it also carried an obscure air of reticence, inaccessibility, twilight hostility, and deep mystery. On the 5th day, I lay down for a nap in the afternoon and woke to a filtered light of early evening. I launched my kayak and went for my customary paddle to the river. When I returned, I noticed the first weather change since my arrival. The weather's starting to change, and a lot of these events happen with weather changes. After dinner, I stepped outside onto the front porch. The clouds were a lid sealing the roof of the fjord and making the standing air close and muggy. In the pitch black beyond the porch, the night was conspicuously silent. The water was still, there wasn't a breath of wind, and I couldn't hear any bird calls or seals catching fish close to the shore like the previous nights. You notice the animals are starting to get quiet and how everything's starting to lose the wildlife in the area. That's usually a good sign that there's a predator in the area. I went back inside and I exchanged texts with my friend on a satellite communication device. Then I heard a strange sound somewhere in the distance. I stepped back out onto the porch and listened carefully. Yes, there it was again. It sounded as big rocks or boulders were being turned over or thrown. It must be a black bear looking for a late night snack in the evening. I reasoned, and perhaps rocks loosened by the change of temperature falling out of the cliffs. I strained to hear any other clue as to the source. That's when the strange owl-like vocalizations started. It seemed like several of them, replying to each other from different locations in the distance. Between these sounds was absolute silence. A lot of Native Americans said that they used owl sounds and other animal sounds to communicate. Whenever they're communicating in an area and you have a large predator, the smaller animals will leave the area. Same as deer hunting or anywhere else. You get a panther or a bobcat or something like that in the area, your other prey will start leaving the area. Half an hour later, the tumbling boulder sounds continued. Brushing my teeth, I tried to convince myself that the periodic silences were peaceful rather than strained. Suddenly, one of the rocks erupted with an intensity of an explosion. It was much closer than ever before. My toothbrush nearly fell out of my mouth. My hair stood on end. Was I not alone? Was there illegal logging nearby? I hadn't seen any lights, no traces of human activity at all. It couldn't be, especially not 11:45 at night. No, I was completely alone in this remote corner of my world, and I was beginning to feel it. My instincts told me to retreat into sleep. I had probably just allowed myself to get spooked. I felt almost comfortable retiring to the cozy half-attic under the roof, away from the dark window panes that stared blindly out into the raven black night from the sides of the cabin. Very soon I drifted into sleep. The rock sounds and eerie calls continued cutting the silence outside. I was rudely awakened from my dreams into a nightmare, fully and immediately present. My eyes opened widely, my breath came to a stop, my heart pounded wildly, and I felt a torrent of adrenaline flood my body. I was petrified. My senses had never been more acute. I sensed that it was a mortal fear like I had never felt. Loud stomping on the ground right next to the cabin's surrounding boardwalk shook me to the very core. Each stomp made the cabin tremble. The massive force applied and its rhythmic nature were absolutely intimidating. More than that, they were beyond anything I could associate with the animals you would usually expect to encounter in these forests. I suddenly yearned to start a life in the city and work in a safe boundary of an office, drawing a heavy curtain around everything that is wild. He's starting to get afraid and kind of, I think, regretting the solitude out here and the seclusion, because now you may be being hunted by a predator. The stomping was joined by the most horrifying vocalizations, disturbingly erratic and deliberate at one. Tribal, not quite like human speech, but similar enough to recognize certain elements. It sounded as something was going to speak, shout, articulate itself, without quite mastering the language. I also caught language on a video that I'd done that was really weird. That kind of was like that. It is our senses that are primary of truth, not our mind. Even before my brain jumped in with thought, my senses understood the message. Clear out, go away, leave. We are here. You cannot be here. After several seconds of this turmoil, I heard them leave with emphatic steps. Two bipedal creatures erratically running off with tremendous speed and agility, each footfall causing the ground in the cabin on it to tremble. I pressed my hands against my ears as hard as I could. I wanted to seal off the senses. I hid under my sleeping bag in the darkness, very much afraid. and my body was strained. Fully covered in cold sweat, for the next few hours I remained frozen, still pressing my hands against my ears and vowing that I would leave as soon as the light dawn had released me. That night I tried to send 17 messages on satellite device, daring only to lift one hand to text my friend 55 kilometers away. I need to pick up right away. Please send a float plane. Of course, I didn't have a clear view of the sky from my hideaway under the roof. Still, I prayed for the messages would somehow send through the tiny air circulation window under the gable. I couldn't imagine moving to a more exposed spot. As dawn slowly seeped into the cabin, I carefully allowed my ears to listen again and my eyes to see again. I tentatively climbed down the ladder into the main living area and started picking up the most necessary things into a few immersion bags. The float plane wouldn't be able to transport all my gear, but I didn't care about leaving my things behind. I was so terrified and afraid of the things that I had heard, I did not mind leaving everything for my own safety. I didn't dare look outside. Finally, I received a message back from my friend. I'm on my way down to the dock. I'll send you a float plane. An hour later, I heard the plane descending into the gigantic scenery of the fjord. I stepped outside onto the overcast morning without turning back or looking around the cabin. I walked down to the water and caught the pilot's attention with my red rain jacket. "How are you doing?" the pilot asked, searching for my face for clues. "I'm all right." I lied. I just didn't feel safe here last night. The ground was shaking and I heard sounds of moving boulders. Might not be a good thing to be trapped in this spot in case of an earthquake or a landslide, right? There was no way I could tell him the truth without seeming crazy, but he pressed me, curious to learn more about the sounds I had heard. I described them more precisely. He said, that sounds like a Sasquatch to me," the pilot offered. "I hear stories from people up here that hear them turning over boulders on the shoreline all the time." Later, my friend Antofino would echo the pilot. "I guess there's a reason why the First Nations call that place home of the Sasquatch." The plane turned down into the fjord, picking up speed and lifting into the cloudy morning. We flew over the dense and mysterious fog forest, cloaking inlet mountain slopes. For the first time, I saw the water's mountain ranges, cliffs, and river valleys in my favorite place from the air. I couldn't peel my eyes away, and it was more beautiful than I had imagined, and it was also full of more fear than I had ever thought. And now I fell helplessly in love with it all again. This article was published in the Adventure Kayaks 2015 issue. This guy had a pretty scary encounter. He wrote for an adventure magazine, and said he would never return to this place, which was a place that he really enjoyed. It was a place of solitude for him. But after that night, he was so afraid he was unable to return. A lot of people have this happen to them in a lot of their favorite places that they've visited for years, never have an encounter, and then the next thing you know, something happens and they never return or sell the land or just let it grow up. And I've noticed in a lot of my investigations, this happens a lot. A lot of people get so afraid that they can't even return. And I kind of know the feeling, because when I was younger, we heard and saw things in the woods when we camped, and there was places that we felt uncomfortable and places we felt comfortable. And it's just like some places you knew if you went there, it was going to be a good night. Some places you knew if you went, it was probably going to be a little bit wild. I don't know if it's because they have certain places they stay, or if it's just because, well, maybe we sense something's there before we ever know. A buddy of mine named Steve told me that you should always follow your gut instinct, and if it tells you to get out, it's time to leave. Don't second guess it. You can always come back. It's better to come back than to be a victim, for sure. And it's not only the cryptids we have to worry about down in these areas. I went on an exploration in the woods, and I had 3 or 4 guys follow me on mopeds with long beards, long hair. They had large knives across their chests with their shirts off, and they followed me the whole way, keeping a distance from me, but they was watching me. They didn't care that I seen them watching me. They were very dirty, looked like they hadn't bathed in a long time. Just the way they looked at me, I felt very unwelcomed. It was enough that well, I took my long rifle from my bag and placed it over my chest in the ready. But the way they followed me, they looked through their binoculars at me. They didn't care that I could see them watching me. They were not trying to hide it at all. And whenever I did leave and make it back to my truck, as they followed me in the wood line, they followed me all the way to the exit of the woods, turned around, and then drove right back off down in the ditch and out through the woods. And a lot of people tell me that they believe they could have been feral people. I'm not sure what they were, but I know it was a pretty crazy experience. So you have to be careful of a lot of things when you're out there, not just cryptids, but there's other things in the woods that'll hurt you, snakes, etc. But I wanted to share this with you guys. I thought it was a really interesting story. I enjoyed it a lot, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Again, thank you for all the support that you all give me. You guys are the best. I have the best team on here. And share us out, share us to your friends. Let's get some more numbers out there, see if we can grow some more. We got some good stuff coming, boots on the ground as soon as that transmission's done. And I got some places already I've been invited to come to. So we'll see y'all there. I appreciate each and every one of you. Until then, keep your head on a swivel.